Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Global Review. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for counting on us and tuning in today. Really appreciate it. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be giving you the overview of everything you need to know for the Imperialist unit, which means case studies in Ireland, the Congo, Kenya, India, and China. We're going to start off with Ireland and work our way down that list until we provide you with everything you need to know about this upcoming test. All right, we are going to first be discussing, Ireland. And it all started when a Catholic missionary by the name of Patrick, he came in and he converted the Irish Celts, or Celtic people, to Christianity. They didn't even speak English. They were speaking Celtic all the time. They kind of lived in their own culture. That's pretty much the important thing you need to know. And then Patrick came in and kind of civilized them in a sort of very colonizer way, or missionary type way that's been done many, many times in many, many places across this great world that we live in. And he converted the Irish Celts to Christianity, Celtic, whatever, to Christianity, and establishing an Ireland as a Catholic country. It was a pretty big situation. And sooner or later, Henry II, King of England, forced Ireland to recognize him as the Lord of Ireland. So he, without much of a military fight, came in and established himself as the man in charge in Ireland. This was in 1171. He forced Ireland to recognize him as the Lord of Ireland with very little military conflict. He came in and said, okay, this is the way it's going to be, and I'm going to lord over you since... and don't get this confused. Just to give you a better idea of where Ireland is in relation to England. So if you have London's on that kind of bigger, more like the bigger island, and England's there, Scotland's also there. And if you look at Ireland, they're kind of off in the corner. So they are in a vulnerable position, but they're also very close to a huge center of power, which is Great Britain at the time. So they're able to really get that quite easy. Henry VIII later forced Ireland's parliament to declare him the King of Ireland, and sooner or later, through just a bunch of really aggression from Ireland's on the behalf of the king and the English monarchy, Ireland lost any form of self-government and became part of the United Kingdom in Great Britain under the Act of the Union. Ireland no longer had an independent parliament and was controlled by Great Britain completely. Daniel O'Connell helped Catholics win the right to serve in the British Parliament and hold other public offices. However, he was not successful in overturning the Act of Union to reestablish an independent Irish Parliament. So Irish Parliament was very shut down after a while, and after Henry came in there, Henry VIII came in there, so they maintained their control. They shut off the Irish's ability to govern themselves, and that pretty much sealed the deal. That was when we knew that England had full power over this thing. And how do they gain control? Well, this is a little bit more direct. Under the Act of the Union and the penal laws, the British were able to turn the Irish into subsistence farmers. That means the exploitation of wheat, oats, and barley and rye did nothing to help the status of exportation of wheat, oats, barley and rye did nothing to help the financial status of these poor farmers. The produce was used to pay taxes and rents to English landlords. And this is a situation that's happened in similar places like France, subject of our last episode. The people creating the wealth were not getting any of it set back to them. They were just, the English landlords were the people who were receiving all the profit in this situation. These profits did nothing for the economy of Ireland, but did help English landlords to prosper exponentially. The Irish farmer was forced to remain in poverty and reliant on one crop, the potato, for his subsistence. The potato became the dominant crop, and again, we can sense some foreshadowing here, for the poor of Ireland, and was able to provide the greatest amount of food for the least amount of acreage. Farming required a large family to tend to the crops, and population grew as a result of need. So this is kind of how they wanted to gain control in this situation. This is why they wanted to gain control. This is what their motives. They saw the Irish people kind of as a vehicle to make as much profit as possible. They didn't really view the Irish people as people, but just kind of like a necessary obstacle. This is how the Irish viewed the British, as a kind of just an obstacle around getting as much money as possible for England's like aristocratic class. They kind of just put them to work, gave them the least amount they could to survive, and the English reaped all the profits in this situation. So, yeah, the methods used to gain control in this situation were the Statutes of Kilkenny. That was one big one. It separated the English from the Irish. It was against the law for intermarriage between the English and the Irish. No English may adopt an Irish child, wear Irish clothes, play Irish music, or speak the Irish language. British and Scottish nobles established plantations in Ireland, dispossessing Irish landowners of their land. This is unimaginably harsh here. Many Catholic Irish nobles were forced to settle in the rocky western parts of Ireland. Puritan leader Oliver Cromwell crushed an Irish revolt against England and took land and many political rights away from Irish Catholics. That was a big loss for the Irish kind of revolution resistance movement. They were just quashed down by the English at every turn and kind of dehumanized, just treated as second-class citizens, people who just were not on the same playing field. It was really some very deadly stuff. His forces brutally murdered thousands, even in the town of Drogheda, after many sought refuge in the local church. And that really showed that they were not playing around. They were willing to murder thousands of civilians in a local church. That just shows you, I'm sure you know, a church is supposed to be a place of kind of refuge, a place of calm, and that was just completely ignored by these people here. So in 1695, the penal laws were passed, and that made it illegal for Catholics, which were almost all the Irish, to own land, and required the transfer of property from Catholics to Protestants. It denied Catholics access to an education and eliminated Irish or Gaelic as a language. The Irish were denied entry to educational or legal or governmental professions, forcing them to remain as sharecropping farmers. The practice of Catholicism was illegal, and in addition, Catholics could not vote, hold office, purchase land, join the army, or engage in any commerce. So they were pretty much, as I said before, they were pretty much there to serve. They were pretty much made to be slaves on their own land. It was really awful stuff. They were paid, obviously, they were given conditions to live, but the only food they got was one crop, and when that failed, massive amounts of people died, massive amounts of people emigrated, and the British government did not care too much to do anything about that. So pretty much when this potato blight took place, very numerous, many different reactions took place. But first, the way it played out was during the summer of 1845, a blight of unusual character, quote, devastated Ireland's potato crop, the basic staple of the Irish diet. A few days after the potatoes were dug from the ground, they began to turn a slimy, decaying, blackish mass of rottenness. And at the time, no one knew what caused the potato disease, but we do know it was a fungus that had traveled from Mexico to Ireland. Famine, fever, cholera, dysentery, scurvy, typhus, and infestations of lice soon spread through the Irish countryside. Observers reported seeing children crying with pain and looking like skeletons. All you need to know is this awfully, awfully mistreated. Over the next 10 years, over 75,000 Irish died, and another 2 million left their homeland for Great Britain, Canada, and the United States. Within 5 years, the Irish population was reduced by a quarter, pretty much doing really, and this sounds a little bit sick, but it was kind of the British position on this, because they were giving, by leaving this, they were creating the one obstacle they had to truly exploiting the land and not caring about the people. And the people dying in a certain way was kind of gave them they pretty much, they didn't have any real financial motive to jump right in and say, let's save the Irish people. And they very much did not do it. Many believe that this disaster was a product of social causes. Under British rule, Irish Catholics were prevented from entering professions, as we know, or even purchasing lands. Instead, many rented small plots of land from absentee Protestant landlords. So they weren't even there in Ireland at the time. They just spent time hanging out in London. Half of all Irish landholdings were less than 5 acres by 1845. Some Irish tenant farmers grew crops that were shipped to England to feed English workers in the cities during the Industrial Revolution, while the farmer and his family learned to survive on a diet of potatoes. And then when the Blight happened, it was devastating for Ireland. So politically, obviously, Ireland lost a lot of its political power, and it kind of set up Ireland as a really... there was no positives here in the story of Ireland, except for the fact that British people really won out. It was positive for them in the long run, but morally, it's negative for everyone, and just financially, it was just devastating situation for pretty much everyone here involved. And it's something that was very hard to watch take place. Over the years, blame has been circulated to the British absentee landlords. They forced Irish tenant farmers to live in the worst parts of the land with the rockiest soil where only potatoes could be grown. Even as people starved, landlords had perfectly good land that went unplanted. During the height of famine, Irish tenant farmers couldn't pay their rent, so landlords had them evicted from their homes during, again, the height of the famine, and their homes were destroyed. Landlords decided it would be more profitable if the land was used for cattle and sheep, rather than allow the Irish to live there and grow food. Still, at this time, the British government, and this is why a lot of the British government say they're to blame. During the first winter of the famine, 400,000 Irish starved to death. English landlords continued to export food that could have been used to feed the Irish from Ireland to England. British government could have outlawed the export of food while people starved, but however, the government allowed landlords to export 17 million pounds sterling worth of grain, cattle, pigs, flour, and eggs, and poultry food that could have fed 12 million people. So kind of the economic impact here, but socially, it devastated the Irish culture, Irish life, and a lot of people for that put blame on the Anglican Church. And it was really just awful stuff. The Anglican Church gave the landlords a way to feel good, even good about what was happening here, saying, quote, God must be punishing the Irish. The Anglican ministers demanded the Irish continue to pay a tithe of 10% to all crops to the church, a church that the Irish didn't even belong to, because the vast majority of them were all, again, Catholic. And this is, again, during the height of the famine. So everyone here has some responsibility to blame in this crisis that was the Irish situation here. I mean, again, human rights were really quite violated, and some of the resistance efforts, like the one like Oliver Cromwell exercised, they were crushed. Oliver Cromwell crushed. It was just resisting was very futile, because the British would just send in their incredible military and their incredible technology, and not much really could be done of it. All right, so that's everything you need to know about Ireland. We're now going to move on to our next country, which is the Congo. So, about Congo. In the late 1860s, David Livingstone, a missionary from Scotland who supported the rights and freedom of native peoples suppressed under European imperialism, traveled with a group of Africans deep into Central Africa to promote Christianity. When several years passed, and with no word from him or his party, many people feared he was dead. An American newspaper hired the reporter Henry Stanley to find Livingstone, and he found him in Lake Tanganyika, that was in the Congo. And so Stanley set out to explore Africa himself and trace the course of the Congo River. His exploration sparked the interest of King Leopold II of Belgium, who commissioned Stanley to help him obtain land in the Congo. Between 1879 and 1882, Stanley signed treaties with the local chief, and you can bet those were very fair and righteous and good and honest, of the Congo, with the local chiefs in the Congo River Valley, and let's be honest, they were not. I'm being sarcastic. So the treaties gave King Leopold II of Belgium control of those lands. So yeah, again, very similar to the Irish, pretty much being handing over their land to European powers with little kind of resistance, little military conflict at all, and really through kind of a lot of deceit and trickery, kind of like what they did almost to Ethiopia. Ethiopia, the only country pretty much in all of Africa that ended up completely unimperialized, because they realized there was a trick, fought them off, built up their military, fought off the Italians off, and built up their military to keep things the way they were. So Leopold claimed that his primary motive in establishing the colony was to abolish the slave trade and to promote Christianity, but boy, he had no such ideas. He was a very, very sketchy character, very awful character, to say the least. So the Congo was divided up into separate tribes. Leopold came in and conquered it through superior technology and a lot of military force and a lot of kind of trickery on that front. They wanted to really gain control to exploit African labor for profit.